Hey, welcome back to the Group Project podcast. This is episode number 103. And I am super excited to be joined by none other than best-selling author Susan Scott. Susan, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
It's a joy to be with you, Jared.
So I told Susan before the show, huge fan of hers. Us in the educational world, we are so familiar with her fierce conversations, her fierce work. So the fact that she agreed to be on the show, I am just humbled and honored. I know you're a very busy person. And again, Susan, just thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to read your bio real quick. This is off. I think I said I got this off of the Amazon, your Amazon, your author page. But Susan Scott is the best-selling author. Obviously, has been working as a leadership development architect for more than 2 decades. She's the founder of Fierce Inc., a global training company that helps Global 1000 companies generate significant results by transforming the conversations central to their success. And that's what, her work is all about, is those conversations, right? Clients include Yahoo, Starbucks, Cisco, Nestle, Coca-Cola, and she lives in Seattle, Washington. Now, there's the perception, is it always raining in Seattle? Is that a fair statement?
Pretty much, no. we have a short summer, and then it goes into the fall, and it's absolutely spectacular. There's just no place I'd rather be than here in the summer and the fall. But yeah, if you're a person who really loves the sun, do not move to Seattle.
You've been in Seattle, you said, for a long time, right?
A very long time. Yeah. Long time.
Where did you grow? Where were you born at?
Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Oh,
yeah. I'm a Southern girl all the way through and through.
So how did you, so you said you went to Seattle in like the 70s. How did you go from Chattanooga up to Seattle?
Oh gosh, Jared. I mean, kind of a long story. I'll try to make it short. It's just that my husband was offered a full ride at the University of Washington to go for his PhD.
Sure.
And we came here to check it out. We were sitting in a McDonald's near the campus, and I could hear, I think, 6 or 7 different languages around me. And my thought was, this is the place, because I love to learn from people from other parts of the world.
Awesome.
And so, yeah, that's why.
So cool. Well, hey, we're going to talk, a little bit, obviously, about, the fierce conversations. And you've got a new book. A new book called Fierce Love. It came out earlier like a month ago, I want to say. Yeah, exactly. And I cannot wait. I told her before the show, a little bit out of my element to talk about some of those concepts, but I am like beyond stoked just to kind of ask you, like, to learn from you, from what you've learned through your research and through the writing. So maybe kind of give us a little build up here. Share, we talked about your move from Chattanooga to Seattle. Yeah. Just share, how did you get to this point, best-selling author, and all the cool things you're doing?
Well, it certainly wasn't in the plan. I mean, I have a similar background to you. I was an educator. I taught high school, English, speech, drama, Shakespeare, poetry, all of that. And I loved it. However, when we moved to Seattle, I thought, when I'm a teacher, teaching all these different things, I have lesson plans every night, I have papers to grade, I have plays to direct. I never get to spend time with my own children. And I thought, let me just look at something else for a while and see. And so I was a headhunter, which was really fun. I loved that. And then was recruited to lead some workshops on, human potential. And then someone recommended me to this organization that works with CEOs. And it was because they didn't have a single woman functioning as a chair of any of their groups anywhere in the world. And they thought, we better hire a woman or we're going to get in trouble. And they hired me. I don't think that I was qualified in any way to step into that role. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I like to think it was a good thing for the CEOs that I worked with. So I was chairing these two groups of non-competing CEOs, and there were a total of 30 of them. And I would spend time every month with each one of them individually for about 2 hours. And then each of the groups would spend a full day together once a month to advise one another on their most pressing issues. So that just dropped me into a world where I was constantly learning, constantly learning. I mean, when you're working with a company, everything from coffee to software to manufacturing to, I mean, you name it, there's a lot to learn. And so that was what got me into this leadership development track.
Yeah. So you heard all these different, they're bringing all these kind of issues to the surface that you're hearing.
Yeah.
And did you start to see kind of a theme around like the conversations? Like that's where the meat was at. That's where you could solve your issues. Can you maybe share a little bit more about what you were seeing?
I mean, somebody said, I don't remember who, that, you really need to have done something for about 10,000 hours to be good at it. Well, I had at least 10,000 hours of conversations with him. And I happened to be reading Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, in which a character is asked, how did you go bankrupt? And he responds, gradually and then suddenly. And I laughed and I had an epiphany. I mean, I thought, gosh, our careers, our companies, our relationships, and indeed our very lives succeed or flatline or fail gradually, then suddenly, one conversation at a time. Because I'll tell you why I believe that, Jared. If you would ask any of my CEOs, how did you manage to lose that customer that counted for 25% of your net profit? How did you manage to lose that key employee for whom you had great plans? How did you manage to lose the cohesiveness of your team, flailing around and not really executing the strategy? And sometimes, how did you manage to lose a marriage that you were not prepared to lose? And the answer to that question was, we lost that customer, we lost that key employee, I lost the cohesiveness of my team, I lost my marriage, one failed or one missing conversation at a time. But when you flip it, how did you gain that customer for whom your competition would kill? How is it that you're attracting and retaining amazing people? How is it that your team is really devoted to you, determined to execute the strategy? How is it that your personal relationship is a thing of beauty? And it was, I got here to this really good place in my company, in my role, in my marriage, in my life, one successful conversation at a time, one fierce conversation at a time. Yeah.
I feel like I could talk to you for hours about this topic. This is just so fascinating, talking to like the expert on this. So I'm gonna ask you a couple before we go into fierce love. I want to ask you a couple more questions. Did you ever think fierce conversations would take off like it did?
Well, this is going to sound very, I don't know, immodest, Jared, but actually, I knew that it would, and I'll tell you why. My colleagues, other people who were doing what I was doing around the world, we would all get together once a year for several days of training and camaraderie and celebration and learning and everything. And the word had spread that the CEOs in my groups were really, really doing well. And sometimes they would refer to their conversations with me and their conversations with one another. And so they said, what are you doing? Will you teach me what you're doing? And I said, of course. And I started teaching them. And then they wanted me to come into their groups and share the message with their CEOs. And then the CEOs wanted me to come into their company and say, oh my God, if my leadership team would have conversations like this, we would be so far ahead of the curve. And it just, the thing was, the response to what I was saying was so wholehearted. And I remember one UK chair, after I had done a demo in front of about 15 of the international chairs, I'd done a demo with a volunteer, took him through our coaching conversation, my one-on-one conversation.
Yeah.
And when it was over, one of the guys from the UK said, I just did not know that a conversation like that was possible. I
Mhm.
think I'm ruined for life. I don't think I could settle for anything less.
Wow.
I want to learn how to do that. And so, clearly I wasn't the only person in the
Yep.
world
Yep.
who wanted to have conversations that were far more interesting, far more, I don't know, productive.
Yep.
Yeah. So when people kept saying, write this down, you got to write this down, you got to write this down. We like your words. I can only take so many notes. I finally did. And there was a bidding war in New York, the publishers.
Wow.
And yeah, and I was provided a huge advance with which I started the company, because I knew it couldn't continue to be just me. I was traveling so much, it was ridiculous. And I remember sitting down in the Sydney Opera House and reaching for my seatbelt because I was so used to reaching for a
Oh,
seatbelt,
wow.
sitting
That's
down in a
awesome.
chair, and thinking, oh my gosh, I need to get off the road, at least not. So that's why I started the company. And we train the best of the best trainers inside our client companies, and they then deliver this to everyone that they want to throughout their organizations.
So I probably should have asked you first.
Yeah.
Before this even, maybe a 60-second summary. How was Fierce Conversations different? How was it different from what
Yeah.
had been shared in the past?
Yeah. Oh, there's so much that's different about it. For one thing, there is an understanding that, well, I've already shared with you the one thing, please understand, people understand you are navigating your life
Yeah.
one conversation at a time. It's important to notice that every single conversation we have is either taking us toward what we say we want, or flatlining us. So what is the point? Or is taking us down. So understanding that, and understanding that we always wake up when we arrive at a suddenly, what if we learn to stay awake during gradually, which is where we live most of our lives. But the second one, Jared, the second thing, and then I'll tell you how Fierce Conversations are so different. The second thing to understand is that the young man who's newly married is often frustrated that his wonderful spouse consistently appears before his face wanting to talk yet again about the thing they just talked about. And so often it's the quality of the relationship, and he wonders, why are we having this conversation again? But eventually, if he's been paying attention, it dawns on him, this ongoing, robust conversation that I've been having with my wife is not about the relationship. The conversation is the relationship.
Yep.
And Jared, when I first heard that from a poet named David White, who's from the Yorkshire area of England, I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. I had just left a long-term marriage and I was really heartbroken. But when he said the conversation is the relationship, I thought, well, of course it is. Why didn't I see that? And if only I had known. Because, in my house, we just stopped talking because we had tried to talk about certain things, and one or both of us would get triggered and it would get very, very quiet. And eventually, we were just housemates. We were certainly not lovers. We were just housemates. And I know a lot of couples in that position. So to understand that we're navigating our lives one conversation at a time, and to understand that the conversation is the relationship, brings a whole new light onto the importance of the conversations that we have. So fierce, what makes a conversation fierce? Well, the book Fierce Conversations is about that. You know, there are 7 principles, but one of those principles is be here, prepared to be nowhere else. And I think sometimes the greatest gift we can give another person is the purity of our attention. And that is rare. We're all so distracted. I am. I have to, you know, put down my cell phone, you know. If I catch myself thinking about something that just happened or something that's about to happen, instead of focusing on the conversation I'm in right now, I may miss something really important. It might walk right past me and I'll never even notice it was there. So I don't know if you can see, but on the wall behind me, there is a sketch of a warthog.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, a lot of people probably wouldn't want to have a warthog on their wall, but it reminds me of my trips to Kenya. In fact, I'm going again this summer, hopefully. And in Kenya, when 2 Maasai meet one another on the path, you know, with their goats and their cows, the first person to speak says "Sawubona," which means "I see you." The response is "Sikhona," which means "I am here." And the order is important. It is as if until you see me, I do not exist. And honestly, I think an awful lot of people do not feel seen because they are not seen, not really. I mean, we all have been with somebody who's maybe they're even kind of looking at us, but we know they have gone somewhere else, you know? Yep. They're not, and we might be trying to make an important point, and we can tell that they're just waiting to counter the point or just give their point of view. They're not really interested in exploring, you know? So that's one of the differences.
Yeah.
Another one, the simplest definition of a fierce conversation, is one in which we come out from behind ourselves into our conversations and make them real. So I remember one woman in a workshop saying, "Oh my gosh, forever I have been projecting the images that I think others desire of me. You know, at work, here comes my boss, I put on my boss face. Here comes my customer, I put on my customer face." We call it customer facing, which I hate that idea. Here come, you know, I'm home, here comes my family, that's a family face. I'm out in the public, or I run into my priest or rabbi or whatever, and that's a very special face. And she said, "You know, I woke up one morning unrecognizable to myself." So that happens. That happens to so many people because they're always trying to project the image, this highly polished to a gloss image that they think they're supposed to have. And that image could not be more boring. It could not be more uninteresting because there's only one you. It's you we want to get to know. It's you and what you really think and feel and believe. That's who we want to spend time with, not this image. And so it's a lot about telling the truth. I mean, people love the word authenticity, but I hate to say this, Jared, I think a lot of people wouldn't know authenticity if it ran over them because they're just not. They don't even realize how much they're withholding. And some just flat out lie, you know. Do you think this is a good idea? You bet I do. And inside they're going, that is the worst idea I ever.
Oh,
so you know that saying, liar, liar, pants on fire?
Yeah. I
think it'd be awesome if every time we lied, our pants would ignite. That would solve the problem.
Yes.
And there's a third characteristic of a fierce conversation that is so important. And that is that the goal of any conversation and any meeting, the goal is not for me, maybe I'm the leader, but it's not for me to be right about my point of view. The goal is to get it right for the organization, for the team. And there are always multiple competing perspectives on any topic under the sun. So we have to learn how to ask questions. In a fierce conversation, I say very little. I'm usually asking a question, and I'm asking the question after the question. So if you were to say to me, for example, authenticity is really important to me, I might say, Jared, what does that mean? What does that mean? And how would that show up in your life? We don't know. Just because somebody says a word, we don't know what that word means to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so fierce conversations is about listening, 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 asking questions, saying, say more about that. I really want to understand, keep talking, and mean it. You can't fake fierce. So I've had some people say that after they've practiced doing that, they feel like they are meeting themselves and other people for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Does that make sense? And
Oh
honestly,
gosh,
when,
yes.
when we are really, really honest with one another, when we are really asking and really listening, a lot of fresh air enters the room, and
Mm-hmm.
our hearts open and our heads open. We're much more open to taking in new perspectives and new ideas. And with the CEOs, I didn't want them to come up with the easy, obvious answer to solving their problems or designing a strategy or, making a plan or whatever. I wanted to get way out into that deep blue ocean water where all possibilities exist, not just the obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes a fierce meeting, a fierce conversation. Yeah.
So, like I said, you just released your new book, Fierce Love, last
Yeah.
month. I'm
Yeah.
curious, what prompted you? What was the push to, like, hey, I want to, there's a large amount of books in that space, right?
I
There's
know.
so many, what prompted you to write that book?
Well, two things. One is there is not a book out there that focuses entirely and only on the conversations
Mm-hmm.
between a couple with a very clear, easy to understand roadmap. And secondly, people were asking, just like, people said, you've got to write this down, talking about fierce conversations and then fierce leadership. People were saying, I I am really being helped by this at work, but I just had a great conversation with my husband or my wife at home practicing the fierce principles. Are you ever going to write a book just focused on those relationships? And I hadn't planned to, but why not? It's the third and final book in the Fierce trilogy, and I think it's the most important book that I've written because this is designed for everyone. It's not just people in business or in leadership roles.
So Fierce Love covers, you say it's 8 must-have conversations that help
Yeah,
relationships stand the test of time.
yeah,
And are there a few of those conversations you could highlight for us?
sure I can. I will say that, yeah, there are 8 conversations and 7 magic words and 1 secret rule that I'm really offering to people that will wake everything up. So thinking about what gets talked about in a relationship and how it gets talked about determines whether the relationship will thrive or flatline or tank. We need to be really clear with one another about what matters to us. Um, for example, I was visiting with a couple a few years ago. I hadn't seen them in a while, and I have a tree house on Orcas Island, and they came to visit me there. And we were sitting on the deck of the tree house, and we were having wine and cheese and stuff. And they were telling me all about their lives, and I'm listening. And their kids are great, and their careers are great, and everything is just hunky dory. But the husband looked a little, I don't know, something about him. So I just finally said, "Is there something you're not telling me?"
Yeah.
And it was quiet for a moment, and then the wife said, well, he had an affair, and it almost did us in. but we worked through it. He stopped, the relationship. We worked through it, and we're together, and we're really committed. And she said, we believe in unconditional love. And then she turns to him, Jared, and she said, sweetheart, there is nothing you could ever do that would cause me to leave you. Okay, I shocked all three of us by jumping up out of my chair and saying, take that back.
Wow. Wow. So what did you say? Yeah, keep going. Keep going.
Well, unconditional love is a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea. There must be conditions. We do teach people how to treat us, and we get what we tolerate. And so I said, okay, so you've just given him permission to have as many affairs as he might want to have. Not that you're going to, I said to him, I'm not saying I think you're going to, but you now have permission to, and to do anything else that you want to do that could be hurtful to your wonderful wife here. So, I mean, that is a bummer. So one of the conversations is about clarifying the most important conditions for each person, both of you. What are the conditions that really must be present for me to be very happy and want to continue in this relationship? Here are mine, what are yours? Are they competing with one another? Is there anything that, else that we need to talk about given these conditions that are so important for both of us? So that's one of the conversations. And every conversation starts with a story, a true story, names changed, of course, about a couple and what was going on with them and how they had the particular conversation in that chapter, and how it worked. And then at the end, of each chapter, there's a really clear roadmap. So if you want to have this conversation, here's how it flows. And there is nothing complicated about it at all. I mean, it's not like you have to have a PhD in psychology. You just don't. So I want people to be able to talk with one another about anything. I want people to be able to say, look, I want to, what you just did, what you just said actually was hurtful to me. And, I'm wondering why you would say that. I mean, we need to do that rather than just sort of get quiet and say, well, I'm just going to swallow that. I'm just going to pretend it didn't happen. I'm just going to get on with my day. By the same token, we need to learn how to say, you know what? I was watching you help our little girl with her homework, and you were so patient, and she was so difficult in some ways, and you were so patient and so sweet. I don't know how you learned how to be the spectacular father that you are, but you are. And I love that about you. That's fierce. That's honest. So we've got to learn how to disclose what we're really thinking and feeling along the way. Jared, when people are first dating, they ask each other a lot of questions and they listen, because they're thinking, all right, I'm sizing this person up. Do I want to continue with this relationship? Might I even want to commit to this person? They ask a lot of questions and listen and listen and listen. I mean, people talk about, we talked on the phone for hours. Then they commit, move in together, and it stops almost overnight because we think, all right, I found out all I needed to know. We are now hitched or committed or whatever. And so now it's just a matter of, what happened at work, the kids, who's going to walk the dog, that kind of stuff. And the relationship gradually settles into something that is a little bit boring, actually, a little bit boring. So some of the conversations in Fierce Love help couples wake up their marriage. And, one person said, I mean, it's like every conversation that I have with my husband, it feels like a small diminishment, and it feels like we just pulled off our own wings. I want to get our wings back. And I loved that. This is, yes, you can get your wings back, and I will tell you how and make it easy for you. So, I just talked about one of the conversations about conditions, but there are 7 more.
I feel like you were, and I told you before the show, and the listeners know this, and I wrote about this in my first book, about my divorce. And I think you totally nailed in that, like 3 minutes of like, hey, we talked about everything. And then once we moved in together, we really stopped talking about things and we kind of went our separate ways. And then it got boring and then we're just housemates. Let me ask you quite, and I didn't write this down, but help me through. And I told you before the show, I wish I would have talked to you like 2 years ago before I went, I went through divorce like a year ago, but you've went through it too. So I want to talk about that too. But, in in leadership, sometimes you've got one spouse who wants to focus on family, and you've got a second spouse who wants to focus on career, and they're kind of going in 2 different trajectories. So I guess how would you help, how would you help guide that? And you've probably seen that a lot, right? Where you've got one spouse who wants to have the kids and focus on family. The other one wants to keep pushing their career and maybe make a couple moves. How would you guide those conversations?
Well, let me just say that I wouldn't. I mean, I don't have experience. I am not a couples therapist. I'm not. I am not, and I don't want to be.
Sure.
Although I would say that if the only, couples go to a therapist when the wheels have come off the cart. They go to the therapist because this is the only place where they can have a decent conversation, because we've got a referee. But if the only way we can have a great conversation is with a therapist present, unless that person moves in with us, we're kind of sunk. I want people to be able to wrestle with issues like the one you just brought up on their own, without a coach, without a therapist or a family counselor or whatever. I want them to be able to say, are we, so you're focused on your career, and I'm focused on home and hearth and family. And we are both putting a great deal of our energy into those things. Are we putting enough energy into one another, our relationship, so that we don't drift apart? I mean, our roads can diverge to a certain degree, but if they keep diverging, we might be so far apart from one another, we can't even see each other from where we are. So we just need to occasionally circle back and say, okay, how are we really? Is there, one of the questions I always would ask the CEOs is, given everything that is on your plate, everything that has your name on it, what is the most important thing that you and I should talk about? And if they ever said, oh, I don't know, I would always say, well, what would it be if you did know? Because we know. And so that conversation is actually in fierce love, because that is a way, when your partner comes home at the end of the day and is, something has happened and they're not happy about it. This is a fabulous conversation that you can have with them, where you're drawing them out. You're not advising them. You're not trying to solve their problem. You're asking them a series of questions that help them have their own insights into, what is happening, what's at stake, to lose, to gain, what possible contribution did they make to the issue, what's a step they could take. So I just think we just have to hold one another able to reach. I love it when I'll ask somebody a question and they stop and think for a while before they answer. Because now I know I'm going to get something far more interesting than the knee-jerk response, such as, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? Fine.
Oh, true.
It's like, okay, that wasn't particularly useful.
In your book, and you talk about relationship myths, and I think you've kind of touched on that a little bit. What's maybe one relationship myth? And I want to save some of the good stuff for people to read, but what's one relationship myth that you want to share?
Well, I already shared one. One is that the greatest gift we can give another person is unconditional love. That is a
Yes,
myth.
yes.
That's one of the worst, 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 worst. Another one is the whole you complete me idea. Um, they're talking about what is it? Twin stars or twin something. I forget what they're talking about nowadays about, relationships where it's like, you're my other half, you're my soulmate, you're
Oh
my
yeah.
special
Oh yeah,
treasure.
of course.
And, and you hear that. And, the fact that someone might feel like a soulmate, that's a nice feeling. However, that person does not complete you. You either complete yourself or you fail to. And we cannot, sometimes the question is, do I want this relationship? Do I want it?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that's the first conversation that I talk about. Do I want this relationship? Well, you cannot answer that question until you can first answer the question, is my life working for me? How am I feeling about me? It's not about how am I feeling about this relationship. How am I feeling about myself in this relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Have I sacrificed a bunch of stuff? Have I compromised to the point of, going way too far? Have I, just not brought up the things that we needed to talk about? For example, if the conversation is the relationship, then if the conversation stops, well, you can do the math. Or if you and I add another topic to the list of things we just can't talk about because it wrecks another weekend, then all of the possibilities for that relationship become smaller until one day I recognize I am making myself very small. I am behaving as if I'm just a space around my shoes. I am engaged in yet another 3-minute conversation that is so empty of meaning it crackles. And that happens in the workplace too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So true.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Meetings, oh my gosh, they're just, often really they're a waste of time. They're not productive. They're not good. Nothing new emerges. We want to surface the issues, and all we surface is more surface. It's always the usual suspects. Everybody knows what everybody it's just nothing new happens.
Yeah.
And so in this whole COVID area, there have been two words that I'm really sick of hearing. One is unprecedented. The use of the word unprecedented.
Oh gosh.
So unprecedented, I wanted to make it stop. And the other one is pivot. People are talking about pivoting, but they're not really pivoting. They're not really. What they're doing is marking time, waiting for things to return to normal, doing the best they can with what they have and what they've been doing, not really using this as an opportunity to innovate like crazy. And not just pivot by doing everything online. That's a no-brainer. We all do that, like you and I are doing right now.
Yeah.
That's a no-brainer. That's not pivoting. That's just adapting to what has to be. Pivoting is something else, and I don't think people realize it. So when people say, "Yeah, we pivoted," I'll always say, "Tell me about that. From what to what did you pivot?" And then they look at me like they don't understand the question, because honestly, they don't even have an answer. It's just something people say. They don't really know what it means, and they haven't really done it.
Yeah. I love how you're doing a great job of weaving relationships with leadership with, I mean, it's just perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah.
So my question would be this, like, there's probably lots of people listening right now who are saying, I love everything you're saying, but I don't think my spouse, or I don't think my coworker will want to engage in these conversations. What advice do you have for that, for somebody who says, I love what you're saying, but how do I get my partner to buy into this?
Oh, Jared, thank you for asking that question. I love that question. And I do get it frequently. because many of us have had someone at work or at home who just won't go there for whatever reason. And so it's really sad that sometimes one dysfunctional human being has got everybody else on the team or in the family under their thumb. And that is tragic. So, what I would say now, if I was with someone who, and, I am with someone and we have wonderful conversations, but if he ever said, I don't want to talk about that. I do not want to go there. That's no. I would say, well, it's possible that the things we are not talking about are damaging us, potentially killing us. If a problem exists, it exists whether we talk about it or not. So we might as well talk about it. And I feel so strongly about that. And people are just so afraid to bring up the thing that they know will trigger someone else. But you have to say to this person, look, I would not be bringing this up to you again if I didn't feel that there is a great deal at stake to lose or to gain based on our sorting this out. And I care too much about you, about us, about our marriage, about our team, about our organization, to just let this slide. So I'm putting myself in front of you, knees shaking, hoping you don't chuck me out the door, because I really feel that if we were able to talk through this in a way that felt good to both of us, we could arrive at someplace really exciting and interesting. So, you just have to be courageous. And if you're waiting for the other person to make it, quote, safe for you, which I hate that whole idea, then you could be waiting a very long time. We make ourselves safe or don't. I'll just throw in one little thought on the topic of vulnerability, because people talk a lot about being vulnerable and thinking about that. And I know that, if you look up the definition of vulnerable, it says easily hurt or harmed physically, mentally, or emotionally, open to attack, harm, or damage. And some people say, oh my gosh, if I disclosed what I'm really thinking and feeling, I would feel so vulnerable. So I have a different perspective on that. If I don't disclose what I'm really thinking and feeling, I am vulnerable, because we make up stories about other people and we behave as if our stories are true. If I don't tell you what I'm really thinking and feeling, you're going to make up your story about me, behave as if your story is true, and I'm at the whim of whatever story you're telling yourself. So whenever I disclose what I'm really thinking and feeling, yes, I'm opening myself up to, criticism or disagreement or whatever, but at least we've got a dialogue going. You know where I'm coming from. I'm not trying to shrink my subatomic particles and vanish off the radar screen. I'm willing to take a deep breath, step into the conversation, make it real. And, one of the objectives of a fierce conversation is always to enrich the relationship. In fact, I feel that the next frontier for exponential growth, whether it is for an organization or for an individual, lies in the area of human connectivity. And so if you want to be a great leader, if you want to be a great spouse, if you want to be a great human being, you must gain the capacity and the courage to connect with the people who are important to you at a deep level, or lower your aim.
You're just like dropping so many awesome ideas. I'm just like So impressed. This is awesome. And Susan, we're at about 45 minutes. Can I just take you for 5 more minutes? Is that
Sure.
okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So is there anything else? I mean, I could ask you 30 follow-up questions
Yeah.
on this. I really want to, is there
There
anything
is
else go ahead.
one other little bit.
Yes.
The book actually begins with a very short poem by Hafiz, and it's all just a love contest, and I never lose. Now you have another reason to spend time with me. I love that. And that's what fierce love is all about. I want the people who read it to become the kind of person who, their partners want to spend time with, because love does not make itself. We make it, or we fail to make it, and we are pretty good at unmaking it as well. I mean, it's not as if God is up there ex-machining everything that happens in our lives, certainly not the amount of love we have. That's up to us, and it's all about the conversation.
Yeah.
So I'll stop there.
Oh, so good. This is so good, Susan. This is episode 103. This is Susan Scott, best-selling author, Fierce Inc. Founder. You know her books, Fierce Conversations, Fierce Leadership, and now Fierce Love. And my gosh, there's so much good stuff here. Next time I need to have difficult conversation, I want you on my shoulder telling me what to say, because I cannot. You just said so many good things that I wish I had those words when I have to have those conversations. That's just so good.
Well, you'll find those words. They are in the book, and they're
Yes.
it's not complicated. Yeah.
Okay, I want to go through a few of these quick hitters because I'm just so fascinated on a few of these things. So, and we'll go pretty quick here. So, okay, if listeners visit your city, which is the Seattle area, tell us one place. What is Susan Scott's one place you got to check out?
Well, there are actually two places. One is Pike Place Market, which is famous worldwide. It's a huge farmer's market with all kinds of vendors selling other things as well. And it's really the soul of Seattle. But my favorite place would be to go up into the Cascade Mountains to Salish Lodge for breakfast, and then look at the enormous waterfall that is just beyond amazing, because I'm a nature person. I'm a tree hugger. I really like to be outside. And so I would want to go and drink in the beauty of the Pacific Northwest.
That sounds awesome. For those of us here in the Midwest who have nothing like that, that sounds amazing. That sounds amazing. Okay, what is one book that has greatly influenced your life?
Well, that is a question that I don't really know how to answer, because this is going to sound ridiculous, I don't read nonfiction. I read fiction.
Wow.
I read fiction. In fact, my books, all of them, are riddled with quotes from fiction, because those writers said it better than I could ever say it. And so I read quite a few different genres, but it's fiction after fiction. And there isn't just one book. I mean, it's just looking, every single book that I'm reading, and I've always got one on my, my iPad, one beside the bed, one I'm listening to when I'm driving, all of that stuff. I'm always picking up on ideas. Every single book has ideas, has a sentence that somebody says or is thinking, a character is thinking, and I go, wow, that is so good, and I capture it. So it's ongoing for me.
Oh, I love that. I love that. What book are you reading right now? Can you share that?
Yeah. So I'm reading. Okay. So let me find my books. So I just, hang on. I just finished reading Our House, which is a mystery, which was awesome. I loved it. I've just started a book called Vladimir. Don't know much about it yet. I love Elizabeth Strout's books. She wrote Olive Kitteridge and then Olive Again. I loved the book The Lost Daughter that they just made into a movie. So many.
Yeah.
I loved the book Beloved. And I was telling my own granddaughters, said, this is a ghost story. It's the best ghost story ever written, beloved. And yes, it was made into a movie, an incredible movie, but read the book by Toni Morrison.
That's so cool. So
Yeah.
cool. I love hearing from authors, just some of their, what goes through their mind on how they get their ideas for their books, what they read, how they read. So thank you so much. Okay. So you are ultra productive. I mean, listen to all the things you're doing. What is your best tip for being productive?
You know, honestly, I have long periods where I am not productive at all. So please don't get the wrong idea about me. I cannot do good work until the spirit moves me. It's not like I can sit down and say, okay, now I'm going to write, or now I'm going to this, or now I'm going to that. I'm always thinking about stuff. You know, Fierce Love, I've been thinking about it constantly, no matter what I was doing. I'm thinking about it. So it finally comes out. So I don't know that I'm that productive. It's just that I'm willing to wait and to pay attention and to listen and to see. And when I think I understand something worth sharing, I'll write it then, and not too early and not too late. And so, you know, I go from one thing to another. I am not a disciplined person at all. If I make myself any rules, I will be the first person to break all of the rules because I don't like rules. So I just kind of bounce off the walls, honestly, Jared, and just, you never know what's going to happen.
So I always finish up with what's, you just released the book. And I always ask, like, what's one big goal, either professionally or personally, that you're currently working on?
Well, this may not sound like a big goal to you. I mean, I've written my 3 books, right? I've written my 3 nonfiction books. So I have 2 goals right now. One is I've started work on a novel, which I've always wanted to write. Now I'm writing it, and it's pretty engaging and challenging. But the second one is I want to learn, and I'm practicing. I'm learning how to play the theme from On Golden Pond on my piano. Wow. It's a beautiful piece of music, and I want to be able to play it. So, every day at some point, maybe several times a day, I'll sit at the piano and work on that piece. And it just makes my heart warm. That's music awesome. I love music.
Well, I'm excited. I feel like we broke the news here about the novel that's on its way here. So be on the outlook here in the next few years for the novel. I think it's going to be great. I mean, just knowing how your books have turned out and knowing your love for fiction, reading. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be amazing. So, Susan, is there anything we didn't talk about? I really appreciate your time today. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you really want to make sure we discussed?
No, I mean, we could talk for days. We could just go on and on and on. There's so much. And I wish I could gather everyone up and be with everybody face to face, and we could talk and, just bounce ideas. But I think we've covered enough ground that I don't need to go back and, throw more at you.
Oh my God, Susan, that was just, I mean, I really as somebody who is a lifelong learner and has appreciated your work, I just really appreciate all the knowledge that you shared with us. And that, like, I just want to go back and listen to this and just eat it up and take notes and implement it into my own professional and personal practice. So I really appreciate it. Your time today. I really do.
You are so welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
So, hey, this is episode number 103, Susan Scott, best-selling author, founder of Fierce Inc. And again, check out her new book, Fierce Love. And again, I feel like there's so much, as we're talking, it just weaves back and forth between relationships and, professional and personal relationships. And I feel like there's something you can draw for whatever you're going through. And I really do wish I had this like a year and a half ago when I was going through some of my difficulties, but I mean, you've shown it. You went through your own divorce, and you found, I just laughed when you said that your husband would say, I don't want to talk about that to the person who wrote Fierce Conversation. I laughed when you said that.
But that was before I had written Fierce Conversation.
Oh, okay. I'm like, I can only imagine that guy, that the gutsy that person would have to say that to you. So, hey, Susan, I'll let you go. What's for dinner tonight? Anything special tonight?
That's what am I'm gonna have a big salad with some roasted duck in it.
Whoa,
Yeah,
that sounds pretty
yeah,
darn good. Wow.
it will be.
All right. Well, again, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're
Good luck with
welcome.
your book and good luck with your other projects. That's really,
Thank,
really cool.
thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.